Om Parthaya Pradibodhidam Bhagavata Narayanena Swayam Vyasena Gradhidam Purana Munina Madhye Mahabharatam Advaidam Radavarshinim Bhagavadim Ashtadashadhyayinim Ambatva Manusandadhami Bhagavad Gite Bhavadveshinim Yam Brahma Varunendra Rudra Marudastunnandi Divyaistavaihi Vedai Sangapadakramopaniषदे Gayanti Yam Samagaha Dhyanavasthita Tadgatena Manasa Pashyandi Yam Yogino Yasyandam Navidussura Suraganah Devaya Tasmai Namaha. We are continuing our discussion on the 7th chapter, that is Jnana Vijnana Yoga. So we discussed in the 14th chapter, we discussed an important aspect, that is those who take the help of what is technically called Vidya-maya, I mean the positive elements, they gradually, eventually they get spiritual liberation. That's the idea behind Daivi Hesha Gunamayi Mamamaya Duretteya. The teacher, Lord Krishna, makes a statement that it is very difficult to transcend, to go beyond Maya. So I explain what Maya actually implies. So there are two levels of approaching Maya. One as a philosophical principle in Advaita philosophy, in the philosophy of non-dualism. Actually, it is a technique, it's a mechanism that Shankaracharya uses to explain the true nature of the world in which we are living and the true nature of all our experiences in this world. That is the uniqueness of this concept. The word Maya occurs in the Rigveda Samhita itself, the earliest document of Hindu tradition, but it doesn't occur in this sense in any of the pre-Shankarite scriptures. What Shankaracharya did, on the one hand, he had to explain the fact, the reality that Brahman is the only absolute reality. So absolute reality, you have to use A capital and R capital. What is the absolute reality? The reality that remains the same throughout, in the past, present and future, which never undergoes any kind of change or modification, and which is experienced the same without any change in the three levels of human awareness or consciousness, that is the waking state and dream state and deep sleep state. There are certain technical terms which are stock phrases in the philosophical text. For example, Shat Vikara Atida, Trikala Atida, Avastatraya Abhadida. All these terms technically means what I said just now, going beyond time, space and causation, going beyond the triple lines of past, present and future. It remains the same, and so because it remains the same, it never existed. You know what it means? Well, when you say it exists, what you are actually implying is a transition from its early state of non-existence into a state of existence. When you make a pot from clay, let's say, the pot comes into existence. When a jewelry specialist, when a goldsmith makes an ornament, he actually makes the ornament come into existence from a state of non-existence. That means from gold, which is not ornament, so the ornament comes into existence. So it is beyond existence. What it means? It is the only thing that exists. Means, because existence, you should remember, coming to existence means it's a transition from a state of non-existence into a state of existence. That's why in Advaita dialectics is very, very interesting, and maybe in these what I would call degenerate days of ultra-pragmatism, when we judge everything on the basis of a few dollars that we can gain or lose. Actually, study of philosophy, not necessarily Advaita, Aristotle, Kant and Hegel. It takes our human awareness and consciousness to a higher level. And once you enjoy reading higher philosophy, you actually derive a strange kind of joy and happiness. Okay, at the practical level, you can look at this whole play of the world and all experiences from a higher perspective. So Shankaracharya says, coming back to the subject, Shankaracharya says there is only one reality, Brahma Satyam Jagat Mithya. I have explained all this in my series of talks under the title that is the 4 pillars of Advaita Vedanta, which concluded very recently. You can go to our YouTube lectures, you find. So what Shankaracharya says, there is only one reality, Brahman alone. What is that Brahman? That Brahman is the highest possible concept of God for a believer in God. For a philosopher, it is the highest concept of reality or existence. Now what about this world in which we are living? That's a big problem. How to explain this? You can't say, I'm not eating food. In fact, Shankaracharya himself uses a very interesting expression in the Brahma Sutra Bhashya. Actually, he refutes the Buddhist Yogacara philosophy, especially it is called Ale Vijnanavada and Pravritti Vijnanavada. The Mahayana school of Buddhism has got 2 levels. One is Shunyavada, the other one is Yogacara Vijnanavada. Within Vijnanavada, there are 2 levels of evolution. First is Ale Vijnanavada and Pravritti Vijnanavada. According to the later schools of Buddhism, especially the Yogacara system, under Dignaga, there is nothing in this world that really exists. So, whatever you see in front of you with your eyes is as unreal as what you see in your dream. Now, Shankaracharya says, wrong. What does he say? You cannot say, after having a full meal, you can't say, I didn't eat. He gives them a very example. After having a very wonderful meal, you can't say, I did not eat anything. There was no food, there was no eating. Sitting on a chair, you cannot say, there is no chair. Then he says, well, these things do have a reality, but only relative reality, not absolute reality. Why relative? It is relative because it comes and goes. In the sense, it changes. Changeability is the essence of relativity in Advaita metaphysics. Now that is the nature of the world. So you cannot deny the world. It's just like denying the existence of a chair on which you are sitting. Denying the fact of having a full meal after paying $15 for a beautiful lunch, and then you say, I did not eat anything. Totally wrong. So you can't say that. So Shankaracharya says, but the fact is, you may have full meal. After 4 hours, you will need another meal. That means the state of quenching the thirst, removing the hunger, it is only temporary. It comes and goes. It's not an absolute state. So it is a reality, but only in the relative sense. In fact, that is the essence of Maya. That is the essence of this world. So that's why Shankaracharya says, it is very difficult for ordinary human beings to really understand the relativity of the relative world. The relativity of the relative world will be actually understood only when the absoluteness of the absolute reality. And then you understand the so-called world and all the experiences in this world were just relative. It's a fact actually. The world was not what it is now, maybe 1 million years ago. And it's not going to be what it is now after 1 million years. Changes take place every year, every moment, in fact every second in ourselves, the human body itself. So Shankaracharya says, it changes, it is there, but not absolutely real. Now, But we are not able to understand this. That's why Mama Maya Durattiya. Very difficult really to understand the relativity of the relative world. But then who will understand this? Those who really realize the supreme truth. Those who really understand that Brahman is the only reality, they will understand this world is there, we are living in this world, we are experiencing everything in this world, but these experiences all are relative. So those who understand this, that's why, Mamevaya prapadyante mayam etam taranti. Etam mayam te taranti. It means those who devote themselves to this higher spiritual pursuit, they will one day realize the relativity of this world. That is the real implication. After this, another very interesting subject is discussed. So, in this 14th verse, Lord Krishna is discussing how spiritual seekers, with the help of Vidya-maya, with the positive samskara, the positive tendencies in the character, are gradually able to take to spiritual life, and in course of the evolution, going through different life cycles, eventually they will realize the supreme truth. Now, in the 15th verse, another interesting subject is discussed. There are people with negative traits. So actually, it is the Lord is unfolding a unique kind of spiritual psychology. The fact that everyone in this world is not of the same type. That's the main problem people often ask. See, we want to practice spirituality, we want to practice non-violence, we want to practice all these great qualities. But the moment you come out of your home, or when you go to your office, when you talk to people, when you interact with people in a public place, we are faced with the reality. When others don't seem to be like us. They don't seem to pay much attention to spiritual values as we do. So how to deal with this problem? So you can find Lord Krishna gives a beautiful analysis of different characteristics of people, not necessarily spiritual seekers. It's a very good thesis on spiritual psychology. Namam duskridino moodhaha prapadyante narathamaha maya apakrita jnanaha asuram bhavam asitaha. Those who do not have this power of discerning wisdom to understand that things in this world are subject to changes. So we should not take everything in this world to be the absolute reality. There are people who won't care for higher spiritual values, the materialists. In fact, Indian materialists in ancient times called, Charvaka is called, Lokayatikaha means. They were the most cutthroat, ruthless materialists that you can find in any system of philosophy. They believed only in what they see in front of them. That's why in India, philosophy often goes into extreme levels. This is South Pole and North Pole. Actually, there is so much of pulling in the opposite directions. There was one school of Indian materialists called Charvakas, Lokayatikas. They believed only in what they see and experience in front of them. Nothing more, nothing less. That was their belief. So in fact, in the traditional commentaries, they will tell you that Lord Krishna is referring to those who totally deny any need for higher value in life. It's not that denying religion alone, that denying the need for any higher value in life. That goes far beyond the present day agnostics or atheists. And they're called Maya Apakrita Jnana, means their intelligence, their thinking, their understanding is taken for a ride or maybe hijacked by Maya, Avidya-maya. the negative Maya. Maya that actually takes you in the opposite direction, takes you away from spiritual path. That negative Maya has taken them for a ride. They are being hijacked. So they believe there is nothing in this world more than what pleases the eyes and pleases the senses. And they are called Duskudino Mudhaha. That means Mudha actually means not simple translation could mean evil doers or bad men. Actually, Mudha means those who are deluded. That's what Mohita means. Deluded, those who are totally deluded by this cutthroat materialism. What they do not devote themselves to higher value, to Brahman, to God, in simple language. And they are deluded. And they belong to the lowest category. And they don't have any discerning wisdom. And what they do, they are following the way of asuras. So, that's a term used. So, there are, in Sanskrit, there are two ways of understanding a word. Broadly speaking, there are many ways. Sanskrit hermeneutics is very, very elaborate, but in a simple analysis. One is Rudhi, the other is Yogika. You understand a word, that's true in any language in modern times. Any linguist or philologist will agree with you. The word has a meaning, what is called popular meaning. What it implies in popular conversation, popular understanding. It's called conventional meaning. It may acquire a meaning or implication in course of its use, the way it is used by people in society at different levels of society. So these words acquire a meaning which may be totally different from that word literally implies. That's called Rudhyartha, it's called conventional meaning. The other one is etymological meaning. Yogika means what it means. I mean, a word that is what it implies on the basis of linguistic grammatical analysis of the particular expressional word. So asuras maybe you find their names mentioned in many Puranas and other books. Modern anthropologists and some historians who believe in historical anthropology believe that they were invaders who came to India from Assyria. Ancient Assyrians are implied here. They were very well known. They were very warlike, the Assyrians, well known for their warlike characteristics. That's one. Another one is those who were not interested in higher value. Such people are called asuras. So, Lord Krishna says, such people belong to this particular category. Those who never pay any spiritual, any importance to spiritual values. So, Maya Apakrita Jnana, some commentators make an interesting contribution to our better understanding. Apakrita Jnana literally means those whose understanding, discerning wisdom is taken away from them. That is Maya Apakrita Jnana. Maya has taken their wisdom away from them. Which means wisdom is our birthright. So because of our ignorance, because of our attachment to sensual pleasures, our wisdom, we have lost our wisdom. That's the implication here. Now, this particular term will become more clear to us when we try to understand this on the basis of the 16th chapter. You find in the 16th chapter of the Gita, there is a very, very elaborate analysis of the characteristics of two types of people in the world. It's just based on temperaments, characteristics. They called Daivasura Sambad Vibhaga Yoga. That is the title of the 16th chapter. People who are endowed with higher values, spiritual values, let us say, what you call sattvic values, sattva gunas. And people who are endowed with the opposite of sattva gunas, negative values. So Lord Krishna gives a list of almost, let us say, 26 characteristics of sattva gunas, I mean higher spiritual values. 26 characteristics are actually mentioned in this particular book. They are called sattvic, the Daivi Sampat. And then 6 characteristics are mentioned as the characteristics of people with negative traits. In the later verses of the 16th chapter which we are not going to discuss right now, 18 additional characteristics are mentioned which could be found among people who don't have any interest in higher values in life. So the verse begins like this: Abhayam Sattva Samshuddhi Jnana Yoga Vyavasthiti Dhanam Dhamasya Yajnascha Swadhyayastava Archavam. That is how the particular verse begins. I shall discuss this later, but anyway, it's better to discuss this now. So remember, we are discussing the 7th chapter, 15th verse. That real implication of that 15th verse of 7th chapter will be better understood when we refer to the first 4-5 verses of the 16th chapter. That's why Gita is interconnected. It's not like a novel that has a beginning and a middle and an end. It's like that. It's all interconnected. Gita as a text refers to a higher spiritual philosophy. So those who have got the text with you, you can take the 16th chapter. In that 16th chapter, Lord Krishna discusses Devi Sampat. You may call in English the divine wealth, spiritual wealth. That's what you call Devi Sampat, means divine, godly, let's say heavenly, spiritual wealth. So, Augustine also discussed this subject. Anyway, they have been a good step. So these 26 characteristics are mentioned here. It begins by Abhayam Sattva Samshuddhi Jnana Yoga Vyavasthiti Dhanam Dhamasya Yajnascha Swadhyayastava Archavam Ahimsa Satyam Akrodas Tyagas Shanti Rapaishunam Daya Bhudeshu Aloluptam Madhavam Krihi Achapalam Tejakshamadhri Saujam Adroho Nadimanida Bhavandi Sampadam Devim Abhijatasya Bharata. 3 verses in short give you a list of 26 higher characteristics. It's just a very elaborate analysis of human traits: fearlessness, purity of heart, steadfastness in knowledge and yoga, philanthropical ideas, almsgiving, self-restraint, control of the senses, yajna. Yajna means certain Vedic rituals which ancient Indian sages used to practice, to perform for the good of humanity and also for keeping nature in a state of pristine purity. Then reading higher scriptures regularly, feeding our mind with higher thoughts through reading, through association, austerity, uprightness, then non-injury. So ahimsa is mentioned. It comes in the second verse, ahimsa. Non-injury, truth, absence of anger, renunciation, tranquility, absence of calumny, means not spreading scandals and things like that, compassion to beings, absence of covetousness, gentleness, modesty, absence of fickleness. You can find all these characteristics. Then boldness, forgiveness, fortitude, purity, absence of hatred, absence of pride, These belong to those who are born with divine or spiritual characteristics. In the 15th verse of the 7th chapter, Lord Krishna is referring to the other group. So understand the other group, asuram bhavamasitaha. Find in the 15th verse, you can find namam duskrudino mudhaga prapadyante narathamaha. Those who belong to the lowest category. You can see some of the terrible people in history you find who have done a lot of harm to others, lot of harm to themselves, whom we remember the scourges of humanity. Maybe Lord Krishna is referring to them. So such people are mentioned in the next verses. So understand such people, we have to understand the opposite. The opposite means to understand the true nature of the evildoers, we should understand the nature of the people who do good things, those who are endowed with spiritual qualities and virtues. Those qualities are 26 in number, beginning with Abhayam, Sattva, Shuddhi, etc. Then from the 4th verse onwards, in 4th and 5th verse, Lord Krishna is giving about six characteristics, evil characteristics, negative tendencies. That is dambho, darpo, abhimanascha, krodha, parushamevaja, ajnanam cha, abhijadasya partha, sambadamasurim. And then so that this particular verse gives this, ostentation, arrogance, self-conceit, anger, harshness and ignorance belong to those who are endowed with asuri sampat, means negative characteristics. In course of the discussion, in later verses, Lord Krishna continues the discussion of negative characteristics, more as a warning. So you find 18 characteristics are mentioned in the coming verses of the 16th chapter. I mean, ignorance, impurity, indiscipline and falsehood, no faith in any value, desire, for worry, too much of worry and melancholy, all these are mentioned here. Greed, egoism, stinginess, all those are mentioned in the later verses. We are not going to discuss now. So this great contrast, conflict between two worlds you find. That's the idea behind. Of course, the commentators have tried to throw additional light into some of these words. It's very interesting to study in ancient scripture that tell us the reality of diversity of human beings. On the one hand, there is a divine spark present in everyone. We should look upon the whole humanity as one spiritual family. But then that is a higher idea, a higher philosophy placed before us. But at the end of the day, when you come back to your home, or maybe when you go to your office, or when you go to public life, you find suddenly you realize that the whole world is not inhabited by Christ and Buddhas. That's a big problem. So this big contrast comes. So how to tackle that problem, the paradox, conundrum, whatever we may call it. How to tackle this paradox? Many people ask this question. All wonderful ideas, but I'm not able to do this, practice this, remember this even. When you come out of your home, when you close the book, then we are living in a different world. Of course, in the Gita itself and also in Patanjali Yoga Sutras, in other books, Lord Krishna has mentioned, in the Bhagavad, Lord Krishna has mentioned, we have to practice certain disciplines, certain methods of associating with people of different types. Those who are spiritual seekers like us, we should be friendly with them. those who there are certain people who are totally against. They don't believe in anything. Not only that, they also want to question everything and they want to take you out of your own path. They want to shake your conviction. They want to break your conviction. Without, of course, offering anything in return to substitute. And Lord Krishna says in the Bhagavad Purana, you should be very careful, keep a long distance from them. Upeksha means. So friendship with fellow spiritual seekers, keeping a long distance from people who are negative and also who try to shake your own conviction in your life. At the same time, having sympathy with others who are also struggling like you, but not fully endured as much as you. So you should be sympathetic and great admiration to those who are far ahead of you in spiritual life. So when you admire somebody's great qualities, you actually get a little bit of those qualities from them. That's a very interesting thing. If you read the life of great footballers, or great cricketers, great musicians, great artists, you find when they were young, they were great admirers of men and women who were accomplished artists or sportsmen in their own respective area. Because they admired them, so they became like that, they excelled. Like that, when we admire spiritual qualities in others, we also inherit a little bit of those qualities that we admire and appreciate in others. Commentators have written very elaborately on these interesting characteristics. Shankaracharya says, Jnanam Shastrada Acharidascha Atmadipadarthanam Avagama, that is Jnanam. Knowledge means you should read higher scriptures, teachings of great masters of ancient times. We should not ignore our spiritual inheritance. That's a very serious problem we are facing in modern times. Maybe Shankaracharya had that in mind. He says, Jnanam. What is Jnanam? Jnanam is one of the characteristics of the Devi Sampat. Shastrataka Acharidascha Atmadipadarthanam Avagama. What it means? Understanding, knowledge, by reading the works, by listening to the teachings of the great masters of ancient times. All different traditions, even not necessarily religious teachers, also great masters, great philosophers. Socrates was not actually a man of religion the way Christ or Shankara were men of religion. But study of Socrates is a source of great knowledge. So Acharya here means those who practice certain values. That's the real meaning of Acharya in Sanskrit. Achinodiki shastrani acharya sthapayetevi swayam acharyadecha abhyadasmat acharya uchyate. So Socrates or Plato, Aristotle, they were acharyas, teachers. So in Western spiritual, cultural tradition. And in a oriented tradition, maybe there were different types of teachers, so many teachers. So they have given us a great wealth. We should own that wealth. We should not disown it. We should not disinherit ourselves of what is truly ours, our inheritance. And that's why Ramanuja says Jnana Yoga is Prakriti Viyukta Atma Surupa Nishtha. Means this with that strong conviction that our true nature goes beyond the body mind complex. And then Ramanuja also says akrodha, absence of anger. Akrodhagam parapeda phala chitta vigarahidutvam dama manaso vishyonmukha nivritti samshiranam. All these great teachings you find, Ramanuja himself says. And Ramanuja's follower, another great man is called Vedanta Deshika, says Vibhagaha atra gunakriyadibhihi vakshimanehi eya suptam bhayam shokam ityadibhihi. So according to our action and our characteristics, guna means our characteristics, tendencies and our action. Lord Krishna has divided humanity into different groups. So the 15th verse of the 7th chapter is a reference to people who are endowed with asuri sampat. That's why Lord Krishna says, Maya apakrita jnana asuram bhavamasitaha. They have this asuram bhava, means negative traits of our mind, in short. Then the 16th verse is very well known for many reasons. The 16th verse is very, very, very interesting. Chaduvidha bhajante mam janaga sugrudinorjuna arto jijnasa artharthi jnani-cha bharadashava. So Chaduvidha bhajante mam. 4 types of people worship me. Let's say here Lord Krishna is discussing those who are endowed with Devi Sampat, the positive spiritual qualities, those who take to higher value. Something very interesting for us to remember is spirituality is discussed here not as some kind of a ritualistic creed or cult or religion. Spirituality is discussed here from the highest philosophical perspective with a strong practical application. That is very interesting. That's why these characteristics are clearly elaborated. See, if a person claims to meditate on God and he becomes so cruel and monstrous to all others, then better not to worship a God whose meditation makes you much worse than normal human beings. So people question religion because when you turn your mind to God, religion, spirituality, that should reflect and express itself in our behavior with other fellow human beings. That's why instead of talking about going to a temple, Lord Krishna is explaining how we should behave outside the temple. Maybe that is more difficult. So the big religion begins not inside the temple, but religion begins in our own attitudes, actions, behaviors, our practicing higher virtues. After that, he is settling down to discuss another very interesting subject. Among those who turn to higher values, there are 4 categories. Chadurvidha means 4 types. Artho jijnasa artharthi jnani. Those who are afflicted, maybe sickness, maybe a problem in life, personal life, and they turn to God and pray, please save me. Lord Krishna says, okay, nothing wrong in it. Because instead of taking resort to something else, they're turning to God for finding a solution to their problems. That's the idea behind. And those who want to know about God, God here means the spirituality, so to speak. They also turn to higher values in spiritual life. Then the next category are artharthi, people who are poor. Artha could mean anything that we have a desire for, anything that we want to get. Maybe those who are poor, they want money, wealth, home. Well, if a person doesn't have a good job, let us pray to God. After all, he is not resorting to something much worse. Pray to God. Lord Krishna says, they have also a place in my empire. But the highest one is he or she who have practiced higher spiritual values and understood the fact that God lives within our hearts and God lives within everyone's hearts. God is, in the highest sense of that term, one divine reality, present in everything, present everywhere. So that is the uniqueness of this particular verse, and I can discuss this maybe on the basis of Shankaracharya's commentary. Shankaracharya has written a very interesting commentary on this. It's very interesting. So, chaturvidhaha chaturprakaраha bhajante sevante mam jana sukridina punyakarmana he Arjuna. I mean, those who have done some good actions, those who have meditated for their own spiritual welfare, or those who have done something good for others, those who think, act and speak and live and try to do good for others and good for themselves, practicing certain values and virtues in their life. So punya karma, I mean, it's called those who do good actions. They belong to 4 categories. One category, well, you can't say that they have realized the highest truth. But after returning from the office, they sit for some time meditating, reading a holy book or praying to God maybe for 5 minutes. Morning also they do, evening they do, maybe Sundays going to church or some other day going to temple or synagogue or any place mechanically. They are not able to think of higher values all the time. One day they will reach that stage, but right now they have not reached that stage. Right now, things are going mechanically. Well, that is also good, but you have still a long way to go. That's what Lord Krishna says. So such people belong to one category, Artha Jijnasu Artharthi. Those who are praying to God for solving a problem in their life. It may be loss of job, loss of money, loss of health, sickness, praying to God for health. Nothing wrong in it. We should remember that everyone cannot expect to be an Einstein. So those who read books on Advaita philosophy, frequently we read great spiritual teachers like Christ or Buddha, Sri Ramakrishna, Shankaracharya, who never wanted anything. I also want to be like that. So it's just like, well, if you want to study physics and join in the primary school, I want to be an Einstein. You can be an Einstein, not now, maybe after 30 years. Like that, at the beginning, bhakti or devotion may start as a mechanical practice. It's called Gauni Bhakti or Gauna Bhakti, Apara Bhakti. That is a technical term used by great devotional philosophers like Ramanuja. They have not reached the highest state and they belong to Sattvika, Rajasiga, Tamasiga levels. So, this is where Ramanuja says, Gauni Tridha Guna Bhedat Artadi Bhedat. Va, that's it. Narada says, this mechanical devotion, especially for those who have not yet reached the highest level, at the beginning, it could be mechanical, morning, half an hour, evening, half an hour. Fine. Or maybe once a day, going to church and pray. Wonderful. That's fine. But we should always remember that is certainly not the highest state, but is certainly a very good beginning. If you try to get a very high grade in the kindergarten, that's a very good beginning on the way to become an Einstein once upon, maybe much later. So one is called this early state. And the early state may be Artha Jijnasu Artharthi. Those who are turning to higher values of spirituality or God out of a problem. Or maybe maybe they want to acquire, they want to get something, get a job, get enough wealth to sustain their life in this world. It's wonderful. That is called mechanical. There is another kind of bhakti. It is called para bhakti or mukhya bhakti. That is the fourth category, jnani. The artho, jignasu, artharthi, jnani. The first three categories belong to the mechanical level of spiritual practices. The greatness of Gita is, of this particular verse is, Lord Krishna gives a place to everyone. So sometimes in modern times, I have to face this, and during interaction in Vivekananda Hall in our temple, new temple, during interaction. Sometimes our friends ask this question. Well, Buddha and Christ, I can also be like that. We also can be Buddhas. We have to wait maybe a few life cycles more to pass through. Then we'll become like that, not immediately. So slowly, from mechanical devotion, from what is called aparabhakti, secondary devotion, we will reach the higher devotion, parabhakti. That's why Lord Krishna says, everyone will reach the goal. And Shankaracharya says, all of them equally are endued with higher values. They are all the Sukritinaha. You know, Sukritina. Sukrita means those who do good things, those who have turned their life into a positive direction. And we'll discuss this again in the next session. It's a very interesting subject. It gives us very deep insight, and it may help us to understand where we stand and go ahead further in the right direction. Now you are most welcome to ask questions that will give me a chance to explain further. Okay, thank you.
Pranam Swami Maharaj.
Yeah.
Most then Saugata, I have a question. So you are mentioning that if you eat a lot of food and then say I didn't eat. So there is a story in there Vyasa is going over Yamuna and the gopis say he ate a lot of stuff from gopi and then say that I didn't eat
I shall explain. It's very interesting. Vyasa had reached a very high state. Vyasa is a representative of the highest spiritual experience. He always lived in a state where he in a state of perpetual identification with Brahman, and he didn't identify himself with the body and mind. What Shankaracharya says in this context, those who have not gone beyond, those who have not transcended body consciousness, those who are not fully gone beyond the body consciousness, if they say, well, I didn't eat anything, then it is wrong. That is the real meaning. Shankara himself makes a very elaborate bhashya. He says, that's the thing. For the highest person, like Vyasa or Shuka, it's okay. Not for everyone. And that's why, in one problem in Gita is, or any scripture is, our scriptures fully accept democracy and egalitarianism. But the point is, we should evolve from where we stand, and we should reach that level of spiritual enlightenment as an experience and not a concept, not an idea. So Shankaracharya is referring to people who falsely claim retaining their body awareness, their body consciousness completely. They act and pretend to be totally beyond body consciousness. He's actually talking about. That's why he brings out this contradiction, in fact. And again, it's a refutation of one particular school of philosophy which really totally denied the reality of empirical world. That's the thing. Actually, that's called in the Alaya Vijnana and Pravritti Vijnanavada, there is one school according to Dingnaga. who was one of the greatest dialecticians of this Mahayana tradition, he totally denied the reality of objective world. And he equated waking state experience with dream state. Dream and waking state are the same. Shankaracharya he written a long thesis refuting this view. He says there is a relative difference between dream and waking state. Similarly, what we actually experience in waking state, in empirical world, cannot be totally denied, but it is only relative, but it is not absolutely unreal, but it is not absolutely real either. That's the idea. If it is absolutely real, it will never change. If it is simply absolutely unreal, we will never experience it.
Thank you, Mala.
Yeah. It's a dialectical point which I brought in by context as.
Pranam Swamiji, I have a follow-up question related to this, and it has to do with some of the fundamental aspects of non-duality. So you've made statements in the past that when we talk of relative, it's of course in the context of something that is absolute, right?
Yeah.
So that automatically puts you in a dual context, something that is absolute, something else that is relative.
Yeah.
We also say that, but if you take Nama and Rupa out, then you will find that the world is nothing but Brahman itself, right?
Yeah.
But still, we are talking about some changes, even a change in a form is a kind of change. And if we say that there is nothing but Brahman, there is only non-duality, how do we explain this change, right? Either you have to be in a Sankhya context where there is something that is absolute and something that is changing. But if you say there is only one thing, then how do we explain this change? Because we all are experiencing that change.
Yeah. No, I shall try. So your question is, so Advaita is not really Advaita because on the one hand we talk about the changing relative and on the other hand we talk about the unchanging absolute. So that reduces the whole thing into some kind of duality. That's the real point. I addressed that problem. But you made a statement which is technically wrong. That is, Sankhya is absolute dualism. Prakriti undergoes evolution. After evolution, Prakriti remains the same. So Purusha and Prakriti are unchanging, absolute categories in Sankhya philosophy. It is a very strong, it is a totally uncompromising kind of dualism. Now coming to the subject, okay. Now, let us say, Jivan Mukta, it means those who have transcended the relative, the empirical, those who reach the highest spiritual enlightenment, let's say. How do they live in this world? How do they look upon this world? I shall explain this with the help of this analogy. That's the best way to analyze. Let us say this, and I'm just using this analogy for the present context. In a room, semi-dark room, there is a piece of rope, and because there is not enough light, a rope is mistaken to be a snake, and then you bring light, then you realize that it is after all not a snake, it is only a rope. Okay. Now here the snake idea, remember the snake idea refers to our memory. We have seen snake somewhere and that idea is superimposed on the rope, which actually resembles in shape and color, resembles a snake. Now, when you finally realize that it is not a snake but a rope, what you are doing, what you formerly misunderstood to be a snake is now recognized to be a rope. In other words, as snake it is unreal, as rope it is real. Now, when a person transcends transcends body consciousness, when he becomes an enlightened Advaitin, what happens is he continues to see the world, he continues living in this world, but for him the world as a distinct entity doesn't exist. The world is experienced to be non-different and non-distinct from Brahman. This is to be understood. In Vedanta, there are two levels. At the philosophical level, which is the level of duality, which is the level of Dvaita, duality. Philosophy is possible only at the level of duality. Even Advaita philosophy as a philosophy belongs to Dvaita. Advaita as an experience belongs to Advaita. Remember this. So Brahma Satyam Jagat Mithya, Brahman is only reality, Jagat is only relative, it is changing, it is not absolutely real. That distinction actually is only an approach to the highest reality from a philosophical point of view. And Shankaracharya says, at the highest level, when you experience, then what happens is, the world in which you are living, the world is experienced to be non-different from Brahman itself. That's why Brahma Satyam, Jagat Satyam. World is real, Brahman is real, is the experience. World is Mithya, Brahman is the only reality, is philosophy. But to understand, to live, to reach this level of experience, you have to meditate upon this, on the relativity of this world and on the truth of Brahman, the absoluteness of Brahman. That is a meditative process. So when you reach the level of total identification with the all-pervading reality, then the world in which we are living is not experienced to be Nama-Rupa world. It is experienced to be non-distinct and non-different from Brahman. Again, Shankaracharya also makes it very clear. It is a journey along the path of experience. It is not a journey along the path of concepts. That's a very interesting point to remember. So that is why Advaita as an experience is silent. Advaita truth cannot be explained. The highest experience can only be explained in the language of silence. But all the books, everything will help you to slowly remove all wrong notions from our mind. And once all wrong notions are removed, the right understanding automatically becomes obvious to us. This is a technical dialectical view. There have been hundreds of books have been written on this subject. And it's very difficult, surprisingly very difficult to intellectually understand this unless we study at least in some kind of traditional way. Otherwise, Advaita philosophy can be very, very misleading. So Advaita is not the name of a philosophical system. Advaita is the name of an experience, and that experience cannot have a name. Experience can only be experienced. Experience cannot be explained. That's why Anubhava Avasanatva. Shankaracharya makes it again and again clear. And when you reach that experience, there is silence only. At the highest level, the experience cannot be explained. You can find this. Well, I instead of giving the example of Shankaracharya, Sri Ramakrishna, or Ramana Maharshi, or anybody else, I can take examples from, let's say, non-Hindu, or rather to be more precise, from Western mystical traditions. You find in Christian mysticism, there is always this level of experience, but very often it was not articulated clearly, mostly due to the social conditions, the theocratic rules and other problems were there. But in the writings of the great mystics, you can always find expressions which border on the idea that the highest experience can only be experienced. And maybe the greatest example I can put before you is Meister Eckhart. the 13th century German mystic, who is a Dominican priest. So he talks about the highest spiritual experience. He says even the name God is only an approximation. That is almost a repetition of Shankaracharya's statement. There was a gap of only 450 years, no, maybe 500 years between Shankaracharya and Eckhart. Shankaracharya lived in the 7th, 8th century, and Eckhart in the 13th century, maybe 550 years, something like that. Many of the statements in Eckhart, for example, are purely Advaitic. And that's the reason why his teachings practically were buried till Rudolf Otto revived it. It's only in maybe during the last 200 years, a lot more interest was. So you can imagine. So wherever a great, sincere spiritual seeker went far enough, he will reach a point where he will understand the highest spiritual experience is beyond words, beyond explanation. If you explain something, you are actually limiting it within the confines of the limits of words. Anything that could be fully explained is finite. Those who are interested can read, maybe you may not be able to the original German, you can read Rudolf Otto's interpretation of Eckhart. Remember Meister Eckhart, the 13th century mystic.
Thank you so much.
Swamiji, I saw a question, I saw a hand up from here now, and I saw a question in the chat from Ramesh Kapadia, which I can read if he's not here.
Yeah. You can read it.
I think here now has a live question.
Pranam Swamiji, I'm very nervous to ask questions and during this process. I was wondering, how do we transcend the gunas? And since we're all born reincarnate, life after life, do you think that we're born with inherent empirical knowledge of trying to realize Brahman and figuring that out life after life? Or is that something, is Brahman realized, or is Brahman just there and unrealized in every new life that comes to being?
Yeah. We can make progress in spiritual life by acquiring more and more sattvic qualities, by spiritual practices which could involve reading, self-study, meditation, contemplation, practice of unselfishness, doing good to others, by words, by thought, by deed, by our own spiritual disciplines. We can increase our sattva gunas. So anyone can evolve along this path, this journey from tamoguna to rajoguna to sattva-guna. And as we get fully saturated with sattva-guna, as we get the sattva-guna, then we'll reach a point that we cannot turn but to God, higher reality, for our needs. Remember, when we mentioned the name God in the Gita, Lord Krishna makes this clear. He is not talking about a monotheistic creator God as we normally understand in the established religions. He's talking about the absolute reality that is all-pervading everywhere, which we call Brahman, which is also present in us. So when we acquire more and more sattvic qualities, then we reach a point that whenever we are in need of something, when you have a problem, we will naturally turn to this higher reality instead of turning to anything else. And those who turn to this higher reality of God are classified into four categories. Those who are some afflictions, they want the solution to the problem. Those who need something, or those who want to know, and of course the highest category, those who already reached. And this doesn't necessarily happen in one life cycle. But whatever we do, whatever spiritual qualities we acquire in one life will not be lost. Even if we meditate only for a very short time and only whenever it was convenient to us, not always, not regularly all the time, that also will be stored in our mental system. And we are born again. We will be born in a set of circumstances where we'll be able to continue our spiritual journey, our spiritual progress further from where we stopped in this life. And this progression continues from life cycle to life cycle. And eventually, as we acquire more and more spiritual qualities, then we will become one with Brahman. So, those who, if you find certain people who are born with natural tendencies, it's all because they have practiced great spiritual disciplines in their past life. So, they have reached a point where they could begin, they continue their spiritual journey from where they stopped in their past life. And so you find them making rapid progress. So, even little bit of practice will help us to acquire more and more sattva gunas. And once we get sattva gunas, then it will become impossible for us to turn to anything else but to this higher value whenever we have a need. So that's why we become more spiritually oriented. It doesn't happen in one life. Doctrine of the law of karma and doctrine of reincarnation are interrelated, and that should be understood and kept in the background when we read the verses in the Gita. Yeah.
Thank you, Swamiji.
Thank you.
Maharaj, the question from Ramesh Kapadi is very interesting.
Yeah.
He asks, how do we interpret these characteristics when we're in a relative world? For example, sometimes what we consider not to be of a higher value, some other people might have an opposite interpretation.
Yeah.
This is subject to the limitations of time, space, and causation. How do we reconcile this?
Yeah. Really speaking, our scriptures do not encourage threadbare analysis of our characteristics or other people's characteristics. Instead of wasting our energy and time in analyzing the characteristics of others, we can focus on increasing our own sattva gunas, sticking to our own values. In this context, often we cross the path of others. We may find people who may not share our views. To that extent, we may have difficulties. In fact, to address that problem, our scriptures have laid down 4 approaches. Those who are like us, spiritual seekers, we should be friendly, we should interact friendly. And those who are totally opposite, diametrically opposite, the association may shake our conviction. What we should do, mentally we should practice what we call upeksha, mean a kind of indifference. These are 2 examples. Those who are like us, those who are just opposite to us. Those who are like us, fellow spiritual seekers coming together, we should share ideas, we should be friendly, because that will help us to increase our own spiritual growth. And those who are totally opposite, diametrically opposite to our characters, nature, we should keep some distance mentally. We may have to work with them, no doubt. Physically, we may not be able to keep distance from them. But at the same time, mentally, we should practice upeksha. Upeksha is the term used in the Patanjali Yoga Sutras and in the Bhagavad Puranas and also the Gita in the context of time it will come. And then there are two other categories. Those who are even far behind us, we should be sympathetic. And there may be just a few, those who are far ahead of us, we should appreciate, we should admire them. That's the idea behind. So, it's a very interesting categorization. Nobody is left out. Yeah.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Thank you. So I thank you for those questions. So we should conclude. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.